Welcome to the Sprocket Pod, your podcast for helpful HubSpot content. I'm Cameron Collins, and alongside my co-host Mark Lerner, we sit down each week with experts on the HubSpot CRM to break down cool builds and unique apps that will make your instance better. Whether you're a new admin or you're a business owner looking to get the most out of HubSpot, our conversations are going to provide you with unique insights that you can apply. Don't forget, we host the Sprocket Pod live on LinkedIn every week, and you can catch all of our episodes on YouTube and Spotify. Let's dive into today's episode and get you working smarter with HubSpot. Hello and welcome indeed to the Sprocket Pod. My name is Cameron Collins, and every week we break down conversations that are relevant and helpful to the HubSpot ecosystem. This week we've got Josh Oakes on, and Josh, I've been following your content for quite a while, so I'm really excited to have you on. Thank you and welcome to the show.
Thanks. I am super excited to be here. This will be great.
Yeah, well, and I know you're really active in Sprocketeer, so many of our listeners have probably seen your profile picture popping around on LinkedIn and in the Sprocketeer channel. But for those who may be less familiar with who you are and what you do, give us a little introduction on yourself.
Yeah, sure. I have been kind of in the marketing space for quite a long time. I was head of client services for a small consultancy based in Nashville, and went independent in 2013, 14, around there somewhere. So it's been 10, 11 years. But a lot of kind of far-ranging work, different industries in that space, as well as product development. But I went independent and had been doing a lot of work with strategy and data for companies. And they would say like, hey, our analytics is a mess. Can you help us like figure out what's working and what's not? And we would clean up the analytics, get a data lake, get some BI or some just like analytics reporting visualization tools in place. And the VP would kind of like step back, put their hands on their hips and say like, okay, so why didn't this just solve all of our problems getting our analytics working? How come it's not all perfect now? And I would say like, well, let's start digging in and look at what we've learned from the data. And that one of the things that I noticed immediately is, they'd say like, well, we send everybody emails or something, that we have these tactics that we're trying. And we're doing the same thing for all of our prospects, and some convert and some don't. And say like, well, let's talk about who your customers are and let's figure out like why some things are working and some aren't. And there are the two most common responses to like, let's talk about who your customers are our customer is everyone, or B, our best customers are ones who buy quickly, big ticket items, repurchase, don't need a lot of sales help, and don't have any support questions. It's like, well, yeah, that's everybody's best customer, right? Unfortunately, like you can't put that. What you should do is take out some ads, put them on Facebook or Google, and just put like, hey, do you want to buy right away without talking to sales and have no support questions, and then purchase again frequently? Click here. We would love to have you as a customer. That's not how people work, right? And so over the course of working with companies trying to unbottleneck their sales and marketing, kind of put together a toolkit of I call it a framework for identifying who those customers are in what I figured out. Unlike ICPs and marketing personas, your understanding of customer needs to be documented, validated, actionable, and measurable. And personas are usually you just get documented and nobody ever looks at them, but work with organizations in marketing, advising to accomplish that. Like talk to their customers, get these actual audience profiles, put them into practice. And starting around 2014, 15, so I guess almost immediately, um, I noticed that when uh, a lot of the clients that I were working with were HubSpot orgs, were using HubSpot, and this is back in the day when there was barely a sales or service hub, and the major difference between the different hubs were just like what the properties were labeled. Uh, and when I would work with a HubSpot org, I would say like, here's the strategy that we're gonna try to implement here to move the needle on sales and marketing. Um, and the director in the organization would say, "Great, I know kind of how to do a lot of this, but some of this, I can't get to the last mile." And I would roll up my sleeves to try to help. And when I would be working with an organization that was in Salesforce or something else, I would say, "Here's our strategy. Here's what we need to do." And then, like 8 weeks later, they would say, "Okay, great. We can get started on this in 6 months, but the Salesforce admin has some questions before we schedule the first requirements meeting." I would say, I would look at the across the table at the stakeholder who I was trying to help achieve their goals, and kind of be like, ah, I, we're we're in trouble here, right? Um, and uh, you know, my the mix has gone to like uh, over 90%, and now 100% of the organizations that I'm working with are in HubSpot. It's just, it's not perfect, but I think it's the world's best customer platform to build on. Super flexible, and uh, can meet the needs of just as we see it growing, just a vast diversity of businesses and needs. Right, there's just you can serve so many industries and stakeholders within it, and that's both a strength and ends up being a little bit of a challenge, right? As you expand, as the platform grows.
And as probably many people are well familiar, HubSpot started as a marketing platform and now it's grown into really an everything CRM, which is amazing to see how it's transformed over the past many years. I mean, especially over the past 12 months. But how has HubSpot as a marketing platform and a CRM changed with for you with a lot of the companies that you work with? I mean, what are some of the transformational updates that you've been making use of in the marketing world?
Yeah, I mean we really saw the product velocity start picking up, in I'm not keeping data about this, but when I started making note of like how rapidly updates were coming was 2021. Um, and last year was, the biggest ever, and the state publicly stated number of updates we expect this year is, i- i- if memory serves, something like twice plus last
Yeah.
year's. Um, so we've seen a lot of change, and we're going to continue to. The number one change that I've seen in the ecosystem working with clients is the number of things that the number of like business requirements or needs that a client surfaces, and we say like, oh, we can do that with an integration, or we can do that with this external system and then bring it into HubSpot. The pie graph, that wedge of the pie graph is shrinking in favor of, we can get an 80/20 solution out of the box between the various hubs. Like Ops Hub, custom objects have made expansion and a lot of and the automations, building out the tooling around workflows, especially, has made a lot more business cases addressable with, you know, not even necessarily needing to have enterprise level subscriptions to some of the hubs, right? There's just like a lot of things now that people say like, well, we can't do X in HubSpot, of course, so we have to do this with a spreadsheet. And I usually say like, well, slow down, like let's explore those needs a little bit more completely before we jump to that conclusion, because I think actually the answer here is probably like we can do that. The one thing that I've observed, and one of the reasons that I do hang around Sprocketeer, sharing hopefully my experience and expertise and scars, and produce the content that I do, is that product velocity has really, it's brought us a lot of features and power within the tool, and HubSpot's documentation for most hubs, not Commerce Hub, is really good feature documentation. It's really thorough, explains exactly how a given like feature works or does. And the Academy content is really good. I send a lot of people there for, even people who are like, I'm thinking about getting started in digital marketing, or I've been in digital marketing for a little bit, and I'm trying to, kind of see what I'm interested in, and say like, look, go watch all of the digital marketing content on Academy. It's fantastic. It's a great foundation. Where we aren't seeing, or a gap that has opened up, right, as HubSpot moves fast. What we are missing is a bridge between here's what a feature is and does, and I have a business problem and I need to figure out how to solve it, right? Which leads to a lot of questions in Sprocketeer that are like the XY problem, right? Like a great example of this is sequences versus workflows, right? And the dynamic sequences updates that have happened recently, right? Like you get questions that say like, oh, I'm trying to do X with a workflow, and the answer to that question is like, oh, workflows don't do that. And but what are you actually trying to accomplish, right? That XY is, if you don't never heard the XY problem, it's you phrase your question around X, but we're actually trying to do is Y, because you've probably incorrectly pre-vetted what you think the solution is, right? So if you have a business process or a dimension of a sales process that you're trying to, I say, encode in your HubSpot implementation, there's the only way to bridge that gap right now is having been in 50 hubs and broken a bunch of workflows and tried to build out an automation or something, or model a sales process and have it go poorly. There's not a lot of good, thorough kind of domain specific materials for folks coming into HubSpot, either as an accidental admin or as a junior admin, that helps them figure out like, okay, a stakeholder is presenting me with a business problem, and I need to like decompose that and understand what their actual requirements are, and then turn that into the thing that I'm going to implement in HubSpot, right? Like that's and that's really hard and kind of, I think, challenging for HubSpot to do, because the breadth of the use cases that they address and the industries that they're in is just so wide that they can address, everything from SaaS to manufacturing to, straight B2B services to franchising to, the thousands of, industries, real estate, all of these things that folks that could use it. So that, I'm trying to help a little bit, span that gap, right? And help people understand, yes, the features and the tools, but those features and tools are useless if you don't have the like understanding of how to use them in which context, how to choose the right tool and how to use it the right way.
And this is why I think that as HubSpot admin, we don't have to worry that artificial intelligence is going to take our roles. It will change it, and agentic AI, where now the computer can autonomously do a variety of tasks without human intervention, is certainly impressive. But to your point, the breadth of the use cases is so vast that even if you look at HubSpot out of the box, where now they do have custom objects for, say, real estate, and that solves a lot of the issues with a real estate company that might have to build certain things foundationally, but there are still things that are going to be unique to that business. And that's where being the HubSpot admin, not only from the technical side, I think, is there's still a lot on the table for us, but strategically, there's still a lot for us to think through in interpreting what is then set up. So,
Yeah, and the I would love to see some AI tooling that would like really um, expedite some of that stuff. Like uh, the number one job of tools, I think is to bring leverage to the work that we do as humans. Um, the So I would love to see some improvement right there. Just earlier today, I was generating some reports, putting together some new reporting dimensions for stakeholders, and I gave Breeze another shot at describing the report. Just to like, okay, little guy, let's see how far you've come. Um, and it was not good. Um, the A number of times, it said like it's like, oh, this is a report about deals in the service pipeline. And I was like, where are you getting that from? Because A, there isn't one of those here, and B, it's not obviously right. So I think I'm a heavy user of various AI tools. Been putting together a lot of stuff on agent.ai. I haven't been able to like bridge some of those gaps yet. So yeah, I'm I'm cautiously optimistic that we will get there. But even I think anyone who has said like, oh, AI will like solve all of these problems for us has never gotten a text from a CEO at 9:45 at night who is saying like, hey, I'm looking at this data and here's what I'm seeing. And you just glance at the numbers that are in the text and you're like, that's so far off that I know that this is I don't know how many filters you've clicked on, but that is not the performance of your business. So a don't panic. B, can I call you in the morning? And the guardrails around AI, presumably we will get there eventually, right? But the even if we had an agentic like, hey, describe your sales pipeline, and you describe your sales pipeline to the AI, and then it builds out your sales pipeline in HubSpot for you, that would be fantastic. But the there's a lot of things that it doesn't know, a lot of context that even given like an LLM infinite context, it can't bring to the table. And then, if you discover that 6 months down the road and then you make another change, right? There's a lot of like, okay, well, we just have 2 quarters of bad data that we're not going to be able to comp against unless we figure out how to backfill it. And that is super complex, like we just don't have a clear like solution space for a lot of those things yet without them passing through um, oversight, right?
Yeah. Sorry I'm late, guys. Had some technical issues, but I love the idea of this XY problem because I have that so much with AI, because if you're like doing something where you're not, you don't know the context, right? You're not a developer per se. You don't know the vocabulary. you're going down this path where you're probably asking for the wrong thing because you don't know how to say the thing that you want, and it becomes
Yeah.
and that becomes like a huge challenge, I think, for using AI as like a no code replacement. And it's a challenge I'm hitting a lot.
Yeah. And, if um, one would hope that AI tooling would actually help us solve that problem, right? Like the, you can type whatever search into Google you want, but if you have an XY problem, you're going to get an X answer to your Y problem, and then you're just going to keep digging your hole further.
Yeah.
An LLM, when you phrase a question in a way, might be able to say like, "Is that really what you need?" Um, but we, as admins or operators or even just users of HubSpot, you run into that same kind of challenge with stakeholders all the time, right? Um, but I'm I'm when I'm working with clients, I try to get them to break out of asking for features. Like they say like, "Oh, can we set up a workflow that does X?" And I say like, "Look, can you just tell me like what you're trying to accomplish and what your outcome is, um, and then let the technical team worry about how and whether it's feasible, right?" And that's the give and take of how you figure out how to best serve your stakeholders, right? Is like uh, if really technically minded people can get trapped by that deep understanding when they're like, "Oh, can we set up a workflow that you know automatically uh, uh, I mean, a common one, right, is like automatically rebooks no-showed meetings, right? How many times have you been asked for that? I feel like I've been asked for that like 60 times. Um, and the answer now is it's more possible than it was a year ago with some of the workflow enrollment changes. But if you can break out into, um, you know, uh, we have that need is fairly clear as an example, right? But like, I want to give our policy is whatever 2 no shows, and then we drop the deal. Uh, I want to try to reclaim those automatically without engaging a sales rep. Okay, that's something that we can start to talk about, and whether like is a workflow the right move or is a sequence the right move. Actually, like that's a technical implementation detail that you have to kind of understand the features, and you have to, in that case, that's one that spans hubs, right? Like a workflow on that's it's not workflows aren't technically Marketing Hub, but that is rooted in Marketing Hub, and sequences that are rooted in Sales Hub. There's a lot of like implementation decisions that stakeholders are not well positioned to ask for, but we have to be able to unpack that and turn it into, or help them turn it into the business requirements so that we can actually serve the organization and help them be more effective.
And when it comes to this type of thought process and thinking through things like the XY problem, or even I believe it was Toyota that established the 5 whys. So a stakeholder may ask you for a report and you have a cursory analysis, but then you go deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper to truly understand the root cause. I mean, Mark and I, we've talked about this before, but I mean, being a HubSpot admin can be a technical role, but in my opinion, it needs to be both strategic and technical, because you have to be able to go deeper than just, yeah, I can build that. Because if that's always your response, you're going to be getting those late night texts.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. And you're going to have uh, uh, what you end up with over time is just such disjointed and fragile infrastructure, right? Because it's like, you'll have, dozens of workflows that are functionally single purpose, but should be fitting into a larger process, but have been built piecemeal and kind of not considered part of the whole organism, right? So that, yeah, I mean, the best HubSpot admins that I've ever worked with, can do that, can work on the strategic and the business level, and then take it down into the implementation and figure out what's needed. It takes a lot of, there are definitely like mindsets that can predispose somebody and kind of get them off to the races doing that. But, experience is kind of, is right now the number one thing needed to be able to do that. But it is, it's, if you can find an admin like that, do not let them go.
Yeah. Well, and when it comes to thinking strategically, there's, I mean, no shortage of resources for helping admin who might be more technically inclined to expand their thought process. I mean, Sprocketeer as a community and the Slack channel is one, but the HubSpot Academy now even has courses around revenue operations, and some of their content, even outside of that, is strategically inclined as well. And so, I know one of the topics for our discussion today is centered around franchises, but I'm curious because a lot of people, I think, when it comes to using HubSpot, they tend to, as admin, get nervous about working with a company that is a franchise or has franchises in some capacity. And I think personally, it can be daunting depending on the nature of the company because every company is unique, but in some ways, it's very much the same as many other types of businesses. So I'd love to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, sure. So, and that's another space where there are a lot of dimensions to what that means, right? And the a quick overview of what a franchise is to help provide a little bit of context is we all have heard like, oh, that restaurant or that business is a franchise and it's a national brand, but in a locality is owned and operated as an independent business. So somebody uh, becomes a franchisee of the brand. The There's a ton of them. Restaurants or fast food are the ones that people are the most familiar with. But an example, we maybe won't keep coming back to this one, but to illustrate, like a McDonald's, there is the McDonald's national brand. They run commercials, logistics, food, all of that stuff, hiring standards, training, and then there are some of those restaurants that are owned by they call them corporate stores that are owned by the franchise, but most individual McDonald's restaurants are owned by a person who has a company, of course, that runs the business, but are owned independently. So as a business, franchises have they kind of have two sides. There's a lot going on. I'm simplifying, but they have two sides to the business. Number one is they want to help their franchisees acquire customers because if they are successful, if their franchisees are successful. In the case of McDonald's or Roto-Rooter or, junk haulers, all of those, they have regional and national ad campaigns. Maybe it's TV, maybe it's radio, maybe it's podcasts, etc. And they do all the things to support that franchisee, but they have a slice of their business that is focused on helping those franchisees acquire customers and then operate their business. And then the franchisor also has another side of the business where they are trying to acquire not customers for franchisees, but new franchisees if they are growing, right? So there are a lot of franchises that you might say are regional or have regional presences that are trying to open new territories or new locations, right? So like you've restaurants in the Northeast and you want to expand and open them out West or in the South or whatever, and they are looking to acquire new franchisees who are going to open and run those businesses in those locations. So you have like, if you were to say like, oh, lead gen, the first thing you have to, in that context, the first thing you have to say is like, lead generation for our franchisees or lead generation for the franchisor to create more business owners. And the latter is the side that, I just launched the Fran Dev Lab report, a newsletter on that, the topic of how franchisors can use HubSpot more effectively to acquire those leads, basically the marketing, sales, and then development, turning that that lead into a franchisor with an open and operating business, how you can run those processes effectively within HubSpot. And so there's like lead generation is not brain surgery, right? There's a lot of similar tools and processes and concepts, but those two kinds of lead gen are very different. And so how you would implement HubSpot for those contexts is very different. And that's where, if you are trying to phrase like, how do I do that? The XY problem comes to bear, but also being able to say like, okay, what are the business needs of franchisors trying to acquire new franchisees, and how do we turn that into what the implementation looks like in HubSpot? Most of the tooling is the same, right? Like, we're going to acquire leads, we're going to qualify them, we're going to create deals, we're going to work a process, we're going to close them, we're going to onboard them, we're going to run the playbook to get the business open, and we're going to support them once they open. The holistic customer platform that HubSpot has built has made it a killer solution for that. The quirky kind of unique nature of the franchise space has meant that in the past, a lot of tools were developed specifically for businesses operating there. So they would have like, oh, we're a franchise specific CRM, which seems great until you realize like, well, that means you're probably subpar on state of the art for CRMs, but you have some things that are really good for franchisors, right? Where systems like that fall down is, you could probably guess, integrations, tend to be really painful there. Automation tends to be really painful there because those are just two big, hairy, complex problems to solve at a systems level. So if you had a franchise specific CRM, you might have great process, but all the rest of that stuff would fall by the wayside. And the powerful tooling and the kind of end-to-end nature of the customer platform, marketing hub to sales hub to ops and service hub for supporting that whole process is great. And so the newsletter, for example, is to kind of bridge that gap of, well, how would we do this in HubSpot if I'm the admin or marketing or sales, and we are trying to get the most out of HubSpot for our franchisee acquisition. What do we implement? How do we even know, what features to use and how to use them?
If I were a company, a franchisor, and I had franchisees, am I able to use one HubSpot instance, or is there a situation where it makes sense and becomes advantageous to have two HubSpot accounts?
That's the question that every parent-child company relationship, business unit
Yeah.
conversation always have to ask. There's even, I won't go there, but there's even more complicated dimension to that for franchisors often, because they will have kind of collectives of multiple brands under one umbrella. And so then it's like, well, do I need one HubSpot for each brand, or do we need to centralize our franchise development, and how does that work? And so there's no with big hairy questions, there isn't an easy answer. Because also, one of the aspects of what you didn't ask, and we really don't have time to discuss today, is does each franchisee get their own HubSpot? The answer to that, I guess we do have time to discuss it, is probably not, but you could. Depends on what your the nature of your franchise and how you're going to operate. But the for the most part, having one portal where all of the Fran Dev runs, which is that sales, marketing, development, and launch, and then the ongoing support is great. And then the question of, do you need an additional account or portal or portals where you do that franchisee lead gen is very case by case, but you can obviously end up with a lot of portals if you have 500 or 1,000 locations, right?
And that is a very common question that I get. And oftentimes the use case for a company wanting to offer us additional portals or potentially utilize additional portals involves reporting,
Mhm.
because they want to share reports with their franchisors, and they don't maybe want to add them as someone who's active in the current main portal because they don't want to see other accounts' data and information. And so I'm curious as to how you would go about thinking through that.
Yeah, I mean, that's an area where the overlap, like the decision tree, there is not different just because it's in the franchise space than it would be in any other space, right? Like if you have a holding company that had a lot of um, sub brands or companies, and they're trying to talk about, like, well, do we need roll up reporting? And this business doesn't really operate the same as that one. Is you've got to walk out the decision tree to figure out if it's the right move. But one area where that for franchises particularly, um, HubSpot hits the no ceiling really quickly is count of contacts, right? Like, for one thing, a restaurant does not need HubSpot as their CRM, right? Um, there are like home services. You could easily have 50,000, 100,000 records. Health and beauty services, same thing. You could just have ton of contact records. That puts you up against the marketing contact, pricing structure pretty quickly. And for some of those industries, the franchisee marketing to and retaining their customers, niche CRMs for health and beauty, home services, etc., have a kind of a much tighter fit for those needs and don't have those pricing structure challenges, right? Like they figure like, oh, you're going to pull in a list of the 200,000 addresses and do a postcard mailing, right? And then if you connect those to an email address, then you might do some marketing automation, and that becomes cost prohibitive really quickly. HubSpot is just not designed and intended for those kinds of applications without just like a massive level of maintenance and overhead.
One of the big takeaways from this conversation is that in many, many ways, franchises and the franchisor franchisee relationship is oftentimes in and of itself not necessarily this big scary thing. It doesn't need to be a daunting complication within building out your account. And I think that one thing that I've personally experienced over the past 12 months is that, especially where HubSpot is today, a lot of the things you may want to do with um, managing franchisees, franchisors, and some of the relationships they're in, a lot of that can now be handled relatively easily with association labels in ways that couldn't be automated in the past or were
Yeah.
severely limited.
Yeah. The association labels are still, as a feature, I would still love to see some additional surface area for automation and some ways to make them a little bit less fragile as elements within HubSpot. If you're the PM of association labels, hit me up. But the changes to association labels over the last 24 months have really have enabled a lot of sophistication that we could not do before, right? That there's a lot of dimensions to, and there's some other relationships that were involved in that process that it doesn't make sense to go super deep on in this context, but you have brokers if you are doing territory development where you're actually, where you have to build out a location either from a slab or identify a commercial property and then fit it for the business. You have people on the commercial real estate side, you have construction, you have all of these different parties involved. And before you could create, arbitrary association labels, it made differentiating those contexts super challenging. And as the franchisor, you need your prospects, you need your owners in the system, you need your partners and your vendors in the system so that you can manage automated communications back and forth and associate them with the projects and things that they're working on. And if you had a custom object that represented a specific location, say, and you needed to have the owner and the owner group company and the construction company from your portfolio all associated with that object. Before, you had to use properties and drop downs because that was the only way to kind of segregate them, because you couldn't label the association. You would just have if you had all the companies involved, you couldn't say which one of these is the construction company or which one of these is the property manager, right? There are still some other things I would like to see added to make those a little bit more robust, like the ability to require a specific association or a record with a specific association label based on various triggers. We all have wanted that in various contexts before. But those association labels improvements were a major enabler for making HubSpot more relevant for franchisors.
One of the not necessarily newer features, but something that has evolved is the ability to create a customer portal within HubSpot. And there are some different ways. There's the native customer portal feature. There's also, I think, just password protected landing pages. There's a couple different ways that you could essentially achieve a similar outcome. But if you were to recommend a very generalized solution, what are the differences between some of those different options, or how would you approach potentially giving franchisors some type of login account?
Yeah, for the most part, there are so many systems involved. Like one of the dimensions of the relationship between a franchisor and a franchisee is like take McDonald's, for example. If you I've never worked with McDonald's. This is speculation. I'm using them generally, but if you walk into a McDonald's, it looks like a McDonald's. The branding is on point. They don't have a menu. They don't have. Well, I've never been in McDonald's, or not for a long time. So maybe they do have like burritos or something now, or they don't have the owners Aunt's famous German chocolate cake on the menu. It's all standardized. The systems in place there are standardized as well. So most franchises, excuse me, most franchisors have some kind of operational system that portal that kind of fills that role, because they also interact with their franchisee around marketing, accounting, payroll, legal, like all of these other areas. And so they create a like consolidated portal that needs to expand far beyond the HubSpot dimension. The where I focus, which is with on the Fran Dev side, is what we're actually what I'm going to be piloting soon is a app partner that I'm sure some of us have heard of, called Arrows, which kind of does a like a guided onboarding. Well, let's call it a portal for the sake of argument, because the franchise development, it's kind of a B2C sale that becomes B2B for a first time franchisee, right? Like picture a plumber who's a trade certified experienced plumber, is just working as a plumber day in day out, and kind of decide, like, I would really like to strike out on my own, start a business, maybe hire my friends who are a good crew. They can go down the path of become an independent plumber or get bonded, all of that. They can also buy into a franchise system that helps them with marketing systems, all of that stuff, right? They want to be a good plumber and a good leader and a business owner. We've turned them from a salaried employee into a business owner, right? So it's this transformative like B2C sales process, because we're not acquiring a company, we're acquiring a lead as a person, and then we, over the process of opening their business, transform them into a business owner, right? And so by the time they are owning and operating their business, they're working within all of those systems and processes that the franchisor, excuse me, has developed to make them successful. Where that fits in their journey using HubSpot as the customer platform is from the sign on to opening. They aren't up and running in all those systems yet, right? Like there's not accounting in place, and they aren't running the actual ops. And so I'm looking at Arrows to bring it in for that transition of, like, we have won the deal, and now we have legal, we have all of this stuff to do to get you to opening, at which case we'll hand you off to the super specialized, finely tuned, running like a well-oiled machine of the whole running of the business, right? And so that is complex enough and pulls in dynamic data from the custom objects, for example, that we're using to run the build out, that right now it's a little bit beyond the reach of the kind of built-in portal functionality that HubSpot offers. But Arrows is their product velocity is maybe not as fast as HubSpot's, but that's just because they're a more constrained tool. But they have been really doing a lot of work and making a big splash in the ecosystem over the last 8 months or so. So I'm really looking forward to that tool to kind of plug that gap for franchisors.
And that's where I think in some ways, I mean, in many ways, having a franchisor business model, it can be different from other business types. It can affect your go-to-market motions, but at the same time, fundamentally for a lot of businesses, I've seen a lot of common mistakes regardless of how the business is structured. Are there any key mistakes or things that you recommend that a company maybe do an audit of, whether they're franchisee, franchisor, or even if there's another business type? Any key HubSpot tips that you recommend people should go and do a quick audit of their account?
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty basic, but how many super admins do you have? That's the first thing you need to check,
I
right?
feel like I'm in boot camp now.
Yeah, like, oh, somebody we didn't know how to figure out permissions, so we just made everybody a super admin. And then you compare that list of super admins to people who are still or not employees of the business and see when their last login was, because all too often you find super admins who are no longer with the company that have recent logins, and that is not a good pattern.
Yeah. And even at that same vein, if you do have a franchise business model and maybe you are bringing your business owner, your franchisees into um, your HubSpot account, which again is not a bad thing. And it's something that actually can work very well when you set it up properly. Make sure you set up permissions templates for them.
Yep.
Make sure you regulate who's coming in, what they can view, because the last thing you want is for data to be seen in an unwanted manner.
Yes, yeah, permissions templates, get your users and teams, when we're talking about, onboarding users, get your users and team structures set up correctly, use permission templates, apply them to folks when they come in, and then, make sure that you get them some fundamentals training before you turn them loose on records is always good. The number two thing I would say, the the that's the that's more of an admin's audit, thing. If you're coming in to help somebody move the needle on sales and marketing, it's important, but not always super well received, unless somebody was fired for cause or something and they're still logging in. That'll get people running, but uh, this is relevant in franchising, for franchisors as well as outside. Um, the I look at how many deals are in the pipeline, divided by how many salespeople there are, and then just start filtering, sorting, and tagging those deals by their age, right? Like you invariably find, deals that have been in the pipeline for 400 days or whatever with no activity. And if that's the case, I've seen older. But if they are using any reporting to, even if they're not using forecasts specifically, but if you have, an amount on the deal and you have deal probability on your pipeline stages, and you have a report that suggests, projected revenue by quarter or by month based on those numbers. If you've got deals that have been open for, uh, you know, 3, 6, 9, 12 or more months, your data is going to be all messed up. You're not going to have any kind of good um, projections, even if they aren't like mathematically modeled for what's going to happen in the pipeline. Your conversion rate per stage is a mess and not reliable, and uh, by definition, you've lost those deals. But there must have been good leads in there, right? Like particularly uh, I tend to find these distributed in the middle of the funnel, right? Because when a lead is new and hot, you're working the top of the inbox, and then it's somebody's birthday or a vacation or a meeting gets canceled, and then they fall off the wagon. But if you've qualified a lead and then they're sitting in the middle of the pipeline and not moving anywhere, what percentage of those folks could we have closed? I pull up pipelines and see, 500 leads or 500 deals that haven't been worked in 2 months. It's like, man, if you'd even close 10% of those, that would, oftentimes would have put you over the top, on your targets. And one of the best things that we can do as admins supporting teams that use HubSpot for sales is how can we strip that out? How can we surface the folks? How can we automate the folks that notifications and things of like deals that are aging? How can we bubble up the ones that scoring or other characteristics suggest are good or are hot? How can we set the sales team up for success and prevent that kind of thing from happening? Because it's so painful to see like, oh man, like those are definitely not all leads that would have been closed lost. But if you're just working the top of the inbox, or your deal view is sorted by recent activity, then those poor folks that wanted your help that are down at the bottom of the list, they get nothing.
Right. And especially with the emphasis that you have on marketing, I mean, making the most of every lead and every opportunity is just so important. As an organization, you want to make sure you're getting the most out of every dollar that's spent to acquire leads. So that's where you want to build your processes for generating that revenue, whatever that means for your business.
Yeah.
And of course, for you, Joshua, in the Sprocketeer channels and in the ecosystem, I know you create a lot of content. You provide a lot of helpful insight and tips in Slack. And for those who aren't following you, I know that if you're listening to this off of LinkedIn, make sure you follow Josh Oakes on LinkedIn as well. But in addition to that, I know that you are going to be working with Profoundly for the kickoff call. So I just wanted to talk for a moment about that event coming
Yeah.
up and the role that you'll be playing with that.
Yeah, the shout out to the whole Profoundly team, including Chris, and to the folks that are actually going to do the marketing content, Madeline and Danielle, who are also Sprocketeers that everybody should follow. Profoundly is a kind of a marketplace that's trying to solve a problem that we haven't talked about that I've observed, which is the partner ecosystem for HubSpot is like well structured to support big agencies that kind of can do the soup to nuts HubSpot implementation, marketing, sales implementation, build your site, RevOps, Commerce Hub, implement Service Hub, all of that stuff. There are so many businesses that, a $50,000 a month or more retainer for RevOps services, or even big projects with big agencies are just not are not the right solution and aren't the right budget, right? Like a small company is that's whose website project can't be six figures, like they're using a Squarespace site and they're like, can we get this into HubSpot? The answer to that typically is like, well, you can try to find somebody, an individual like on whatever, Upwork, and hope that means that they're good, or you can go, get a six-figure quote from a HubSpot agency. It's too hard, is what I'm saying, to get help with HubSpot. And so Profoundly is a network of certified HubSpot pros that are vetted and are some of the best and sharpest people that I've met in the HubSpot ecosystem. That allows companies to come in and kind of define their need and have those pros come around and bid on the project if it's project based, or kind of assemble a squad. You need a good CMS person, you need a marketing automation person, or whatever. You've got a kind of table of pros there that can meet those needs, and it's easier to get vetted expertise for those like smaller, mid-size, or ongoing projects outside of a giant, what a giant agency is specialized to service. So I think it's a fairly recent launch. I think it's a big missing piece in the ecosystem. So I'm thrilled to be to be in the docket and to have gotten to know all of these amazing pros. We're doing a big launch for basically for the whole HubSpot ecosystem in March. If you go to if you search for Profoundly, actually I haven't seen how our let's search for Profoundly live SEO. It's profound.ly, but I want to see if we're if our looks like we're going to get definitions if you search. So profound.ly is the place to go, or search for Profoundly on LinkedIn. You'll find us too. But we're doing a big launch showcasing a lot of the expertise in the ecosystem. We've got tracks for, there we go. There's our kickoff. We've got tracks for all different applications of HubSpot. There's Nico, he's doing AI session, RevOps session. Speaking of Arrow, Stewart is doing a session, Anton doing the developer track. So we've got keynotes from a bunch of folks in the ecosystem. George Thomas is doing a keynote, and then we've got breakout sessions in each of these tracks with pros in the community. You know, we've got some panels coming up and some specific topics covering, you know, all the interests. That's for the audience here. If you're a HubSpot admin or a HubSpot user and one of those tracks is interesting, the content is guaranteed to be applicable to you. If you're, you know, a HubSpot partner or internal HubSpot admin at a company, same thing. It's just I've seen the previews of the content. It's a really diverse set of topics. So hit that up. It's a kind of half-day streaming extravaganza, so you can dip in, check out the sessions, sign up for notifications, and check out the community.
So for those of you who want to work with amazing Sprocketeers like Josh, Danielle, Chris, and many, many more, please do go to profound.ly, profound.ly. You can get support from Sprocketeers and, again, just HubSpot admin in the ecosystem. So if you've ever wanted to work with any of these rock stars, that's your opportunity to do so. For those who have been tuning into Sprocket Pod for quite a while now, thank you very much for listening to this episode. Josh, thank you very much for coming on. To everyone else, Sprocket on. Thank you.
Thank you for tuning into the Sprocket Pod podcast. We hope you enjoyed today's episode with your co-hosts, Cameron Collins and Mark Lerner. Be sure to catch us live every week on LinkedIn, and don't forget to subscribe to our episodes on YouTube and Spotify. If you found this episode valuable, please leave a review and share it with others looking to get more from HubSpot. Until next time, keep driving success with your CRM, and as always, Sprocket on.